I get interviewed fairly often, and of course, one of the original questions is how did you get into acting? So I've shared how I've gotten into acting several times. If you've ever seen an interview, then you probably know, but I don't always tell the whole story. Usually it's because of a time constraint, but today I thought I would share more, and I think I've only shared it maybe in one other interview that did have the time. But the way that I got started was I tried it in high school, not because I wanted to try it, but because I found an ad in the back of the paper and it was for acting and modeling. And I went for modeling. But when I showed up, they were like, "Oh, you're too short, but you should try acting." And I thought, I've never been interested in acting, never thought about acting, but why not? So I decided to do that. I ended up signing with that agency for a year. And in that time, I went to LA and did, I think it was 2 weeks, different workshops and trainings out there. And I hated every bit of it. I mean, I had to act like a squirrel or I had to act like an animal. So I just chose a squirrel so that I could just sit there and like do nothing. And then I had to do another class where you like lay down and do just really weird stuff. And I was like, this is all stupid. I don't like any of this and I'm not doing it anymore. So we moved away and I stopped acting and I was like, no way, not doing that ever in my future. So I grew up in a small town and my thoughts were maybe I'll be a coach because I enjoy athletics. I did a lot of sports in high school. Or maybe I was like, well, I don't really want to be a teacher, but maybe I'll be a coach or I'll be a personal trainer or I'll do something with fitness. But I didn't really have my mind expanded on all the possibilities that were out there being from a small town. I didn't even know what they were. But it didn't matter because God had a plan anyway. So in college, I was a couple of years into college, and I remember walking across campus to my next class, and I just looked at the theater building. And out of nowhere, this thought hit me. I want to do acting. Why am I not getting my degree in theater? But at the exact same time that that thought felt like it was like dropping into me, my own brain was like, no, you don't. You hate acting. And I knew this was my thought. This one was not my thought. And at that exact moment, I knew that God had put that thought in me. And I just had this immediate sense of purpose like, oh, I guess I'm going to do acting. So that day I went home, I wrote my boundaries in a notebook in red ink because it's just like everything clicked so quickly. I knew this was my purpose. I know what happens or what you hear happens to actors who go down the wrong path after being in the industry for a long time and get tempted by these things. So I wrote down my boundaries because I just knew if acting is in my future, then I need to make sure that I don't compromise in these areas. From that point, I did get involved in plays in my college, and then after that, moved away. I'll just I'll share how I got the lead role in my first film later. But I just knew that I was going to do acting. And so eventually I moved to Austin, Texas, because I thought, well, if God has called me to this, then I need to get training. I need to get an agent. I need to go where there are opportunities. So I ended up doing all of those things. But the part that I don't often share in the interviews is what happened shortly after I had that moment on campus. I went back home and my mom and I went to a church in my small town that we had never been to. I grew up there, but for some reason I'd never gone to that church. And I remember crying. There was some point during the church that I just remember crying because I was so thankful that God gave me this purpose. And I knew that it was from him. And it was just felt like I was just relieved, I think, to know what it is I was supposed to be doing with my life. And I was grateful that he spoke to me. Like, he didn't have to speak to me. And so I was crying of joy. And the pastor came up to me and like started prophesying or just started telling me things that God was telling him and all of this stuff. And through my crying, I was a little irritated because I was like, I'm trying to have this moment with God, and you think that I'm crying because I'm broken or I'm hurting. Like I was ignoring everything that he was telling me because I just assumed that he thought I was crying out of anguish. So I didn't listen until he stopped and he looked down and he put his hand on my shoulder and he goes, he told me to tell you that you will bring fame to his name. And I just was like, how did you know? How did you know that I was crying about this purpose that God was going to use me? Like, he knew. And then immediately I was like, oh no, what were all the other things that you were telling me for the last couple of minutes? But when he said that, you will bring fame to his name. My mom was right beside me. We were both kind of like dumbstruck. And so that was just one of the ways that God confirmed that I would be doing acting and that this was what he had for me and that he did call me to it on purpose and I wasn't, misunderstanding anything. But that was like, wow, it was just wild. So there was also a dream that I may tell you in a different video, and there's still more. I may tell you in another video, but I say that to say that if you don't have a clear directive from God that you are supposed to be doing acting, I would highly encourage you to pray and pray and pray and make sure that you're pursuing it because He wants you to pursue it, not because you're trying to force something that seems like it might be wonderful, because it is kind of a difficult industry. I think a lot of industries are difficult, but the ladder to get there, especially when you're an actor with boundaries and morals and values, and you're going to be saying no a lot, it's really tricky to try to make a living from becoming an actor. So if you're struggling, like, should I continue pursuing acting? Should I not? Spend a lot of time with God, asking Him to reveal to you what His purpose is for your life. Because if you're trying to make acting happen and He's got something totally different for you, I promise you that the totally different thing is going to be way better than this acting thing that you think is going to be great. And if you don't feel like you're hearing from God in praying, I highly encourage you to fast. Fasting is powerful. I've mentioned it in previous videos, but God can really work through fasting. And it's beautiful to say, okay, God, I'm going to stop doing XYZ. I'm going to put that on the back burner. And, I'm going to seek you. I'm going to praise instead of being on my phone. I'm going to pray instead of eating. I want to encourage you to do that so that you have clear direction on your life, because you only get one life. He only put you here once. And following His plan for you is going to be insanely better than your plans for you. So let me know if you have any questions. I wanted to share that to encourage you and also encourage you to seek God in this.